The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital hummed softly as Nurse Sarah Jenkins made her way down the corridor of the cardiac care unit. It was her third year working at the hospital, and she had seen just about everything, or so she thought. Room 314 had a new patient, Mrs. Margaret Henderson, an 82-year-old woman who had been admitted the previous night with heart complications. Sarah checked her clipboard, noting the medications and care instructions, then knocked gently before entering. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. I'm Sarah, and I'll be your nurse for the day shift. Get out. Get out." The elderly woman's face contorted with rage the moment Sarah stepped into view. "I will not be touched by someone like you." Sarah stood frozen for a moment, her hand still on the door handle. She had faced prejudice before, but the venom in the woman's voice still stung like a fresh wound. Mrs. Henderson reached for her call button, pressing it frantically. "Get me another nurse. A real nurse. I want someone else, anyone else." Sarah took a deep breath, setting her clipboard down on the side table. Instead of leaving, she pulled up a chair and sat down beside the bed, her expression calm and composed. "Mrs. Henderson," she began softly, "I understand you're upset. But I'm going to tell you something important." The older woman glared at her, chest heaving with indignation. "I don't want to hear anything from when you were brought in last night," Sarah continued, her voice steady but kind. "You were coding. Your heart stopped in the ambulance. Do you know who performed CPR on you for 8 minutes straight until they could stabilize you?" Mrs. Henderson fell silent, her angry expression faltering slightly. "That was me," Sarah said, meeting her eyes directly. "I was finishing my night shift when the ambulance called ahead. I ran down to the ER, and when you arrived, your heart had stopped. I did chest compressions while Dr. Patel worked to get your heart rhythm back. 8 minutes, Mrs. Henderson. My arms were shaking, but I didn't stop because your life mattered to me." The room fell into a heavy silence. Mrs. Henderson's mouth opened, then closed again. Sarah stood up, smoothing her scrubs. "Now, I have rounds to complete, and you need your medications. You have every right to request another nurse, and I'll respect that decision. But I want you to know something. I became a nurse because I believe every life is precious. Every single one. That includes yours." She picked up her clipboard and walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Your daughter Jennifer called this morning. She's driving in from Ohio and should be here by this afternoon. Your grandson Marcus, the one in medical school, he sends his love. I spoke to him myself and told him you're going to be okay." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. You spoke to Marcus?" "I did. He was very worried about his grandmother." Sarah offered a small smile. "He sounds like a wonderful young man. You must be very proud of him." As Sarah reached for the door handle, she heard a small, broken voice behind her. "Wait." Sarah turned around. Mrs. Henderson's face had crumbled, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. I'm sorry." The words came out as barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry." Sarah walked back to the bedside, her professional demeanor softening. She pulled a tissue from the box on the nightstand and handed it to the elderly woman. "Mrs. Henderson, I forgive you," Sarah said gently. "But more importantly, I need you to understand something. The hatred you're carrying, it's like a poison, and it's been eating away at you for so long that you don't even see people anymore. You just see what you've been taught to fear." Mrs. Henderson wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. "I grew up in Mississippi," the older woman said quietly. "My father, he was a hard man. He taught us things. Wrong things. I know they were wrong, but they got stuck in my head, in my heart." She looked up at Sarah with red-rimmed eyes. "That's no excuse. There is no excuse." Sarah sat down again, this time moving her chair closer. "Mrs. Henderson, you just had a major health scare. Your heart is weak, and stress won't help it heal. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take care of you, just like I would any patient, because that's my job and my calling. And maybe, while I'm checking your vitals and adjusting your we can talk. Really talk." "Why would you do that?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her voice trembling. "After what I said to you." "Because," Sarah said simply, "someone has to break the cycle. And because I've learned that people can change. I've seen it happen. Sometimes it takes a crisis, sometimes it takes time, but people can change." Over the next several days, as Mrs. Henderson's condition stabilized, something remarkable happened. Sarah would come in for her shifts, and instead of tension, there would be conversation. Mrs. Henderson asked about Sarah's life, her family, her journey to becoming a nurse. She learned about Sarah's 2 children, her husband who was a high school teacher, her mother who had worked 3 jobs to put her through nursing school, and in turn, Sarah learned about Mrs. Henderson's life, a childhood during segregation, a controlling father, a society that had taught her to fear and hate. but also about her love for her family, her pride in her grandson who was breaking barriers she'd been taught existed, her regret over years of allowing prejudice to narrow her world. "Marcus is dating a lovely girl," Mrs. Henderson said one afternoon, her voice contemplative. "She's black. When he first told me, I said things I shouldn't have. We didn't talk for almost a year." Tears welled in her eyes again. "I almost lost him because of my ignorance." "But you didn't lose him," Sarah pointed out. "He called when you were admitted. He was worried sick about you." "That's because he's a better person than I ever taught him to be," Mrs. Henderson said. "He learned that on his own, despite me." On the day Mrs. Henderson was discharged, Sarah helped her gather her belongings and reviewed her medication instructions. As they waited for her daughter to arrive, Mrs. Henderson reached out and took Sarah's hand. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for saving my life, but for helping me see. For the first time in 82 years, I really see." Sarah squeezed her hand gently. "Take care of that heart, Mrs. Henderson. Both of them." When Jennifer arrived with Marcus in tow, there was a moment that would stay with Sarah forever. Mrs. Henderson, with tears streaming down her face, reached out to embrace her grandson and his girlfriend, who had made the trip to see her. She held them tight and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I love you both." 3 months later, Sarah received a letter at the hospital. Inside was a photo of Mrs. Henderson at Marcus's medical school graduation, beaming with pride, her arms around Marcus and his girlfriend. The note read, "Dear Sarah, you gave me back my life twice, once when you restarted my heart, and once when you opened it. I'm attending a community workshop next week about unlearning prejudice and bridging divides. At 82, I figure it's about time I did some real growing. Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving, even when I couldn't see the same in you. You are an extraordinary nurse and an even more extraordinary human being, with deep gratitude and respect, Margaret Henderson P.S. Marcus asks that I tell you he's specializing in cardiology. He says he wants to save lives just like you do. He's the best thing our family ever did right." Sarah pinned the photo to her locker, where it joined dozens of other cards and pictures from grateful patients. Every time she saw it, she was reminded that healing wasn't just about medicine and procedures. Sometimes, the most important healing happened in the spaces between people, in the willingness to see each other's humanity, even in the most difficult moments, and sometimes, the most powerful response to hate wasn't anger or even indifference. It was simply showing up, doing your job with dignity and compassion, and giving people a chance to be better than they thought they could be. Sarah Jenkins sat in the hospital cafeteria, stirring her coffee absently as she scrolled through her phone. It had been a long shift, and she was looking forward to getting home to her family. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband, David. "Don't forget, parent-teacher conferences tonight. I'll pick up the kids." She smiled and was about to reply when she heard a familiar voice. "Excuse me. Sarah?" Looking up, she was surprised to see Mrs. Margaret Henderson standing beside her table, leaning lightly on a wooden cane. The elderly woman looked healthier than she had in the hospital, color in her cheeks, eyes bright and alert. "Mrs. Henderson." Sarah stood immediately, gesturing to the empty chair. "Please, sit down. What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" Margaret settled into the chair with a soft sigh. "I'm fine, dear. Better than fine, actually. I had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Patel. Clean bill of health, well, as clean as an 82-year-old heart can get." She smiled warmly. "But I was hoping I'd run into you. I have something to ask you." Sarah sat back down, intrigued. "Of course. What is it?" Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. "I've been volunteering at a community center in my neighborhood, part of that bridge building program I mentioned in my letter. We're organizing a health fair for the community, and we desperately need medical professionals to volunteer." She slid the clipping across the table. "Would you consider being part of it? Maybe give a talk about heart health, or just be there to answer questions?" Sarah looked at the details. The health fair was in a neighborhood she knew well, historically white, working class, and not always welcoming to people who looked like her. Margaret seemed to read her hesitation. "I know what you're thinking. And you're right, it's not the most progressive area. That's exactly why we need you there. People need to see that healthcare, that compassion, that expertise. It doesn't come in just one color." Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Mercy General Administration. "I'm sorry, I need to take this," Sarah said apologetically. "Of course, dear." Sarah answered, and her expression slowly changed from curiosity to concern, then to something harder to read. After a brief conversation, she hung up. "Is everything all right?" Margaret asked. Sarah took a deep breath. That was the hospital administrator. There's been a situation. A patient's family member filed a complaint about me. They're requesting I be removed from their loved one's care. On what grounds? Sarah's jaw tightened. The same grounds you once had, Mrs. Henderson. They don't want a black nurse. Margaret's face flushed with anger, not at Sarah, but at the situation. That's outrageous. After everything you do here? Who is this patient? I can't share that information, Sarah said, though her voice was weary. Patient confidentiality. But this isn't the first time, and it won't be the last. It's just, some days are harder than others. Margaret reached across the table and placed her hand over Sarah's. Then let me tell you what I told the director of our community center when she asked why I was so passionate about this work. I told her about you. About how you could have walked away from my hate, my ignorance, my cruelty. But you didn't. You stayed, and you showed me something I'd been too blind to see my whole life. She squeezed Sarah's hand. You changed me. And if I can change at 82, after a lifetime of being wrong, then there's hope for anyone. Let me help you show others what you showed me. The community center gym was transformed. Tables lined the walls with information about diabetes, heart disease, nutrition, and mental health. Local doctors, nurses, and health educators milled about, setting up their stations. Sarah arrived early, carrying boxes of pamphlets and her blood pressure monitoring equipment. She'd agreed to come, though she'd be lying if she said she wasn't nervous. Margaret spotted her immediately and hurried over, her cane tapping against the polished floor. Sarah. Oh, I'm so glad you came. Come, let me introduce you to everyone. Over the next hour, Margaret made it her personal mission to introduce Sarah to every volunteer, every community leader, and every early arrival. She spoke glowing words about Sarah's expertise, her compassion, her life-saving skills, but Sarah noticed something else too. She saw the sideways glances, the subtle body language of people shifting away, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. By the time the fair officially opened to the public, Sarah had set up her station, heart health awareness, free blood pressure screenings. The morning started slowly. People walked past her table, some making eye contact and nodding politely before moving on, others avoiding her gaze entirely. Meanwhile, the tables on either side of hers had steady streams of visitors. Sarah kept her professional smile in place, but inside, her heart was sinking. Then, around mid-morning, an elderly man approached her table hesitantly. He was thin, with weathered hands and suspicious eyes. You really a nurse? He asked gruffly. Yes, sir. Registered nurse, 13 years of experience. Would you like me to check your blood pressure? He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly sat down in the chair. My doctor's been on me about it. Might as well. Sarah worked professionally, wrapping the cuff around his arm, making small talk about the weather, the turnout for the fair. When the reading came up, she frowned slightly. Sir, your blood pressure is 168/95. That's quite high. Are you taking any medication for hypertension? Used to, he admitted. Couldn't afford to refill it last month. Sarah spent the next 15 minutes talking with him about free clinic options, medication assistance programs, and dietary changes that could help. She wrote everything down on a card for him. As he stood to leave, he paused. You know your stuff. Thank you, sir. He nodded and walked away. But something had shifted. Another person had seen the interaction and approached. Then another. Word spread quietly through the crowd, that nurse over there really knows what she's talking about. By noon, Sarah's table had a line. She was in the middle of explaining warning signs of heart attack to a worried middle-aged woman when she heard a commotion near the entrance. A man had collapsed. Without thinking, Sarah abandoned her station and ran toward the crowd gathering around the fallen figure. She pushed through to find a man in his 60s, unconscious, his lips tinged blue. Call 911, she commanded, dropping to her knees beside him. She checked for a pulse, weak and irregular. Not breathing, Sarah immediately began CPR, her training taking over. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted out loud as she performed chest compressions, her hands positioned perfectly, her rhythm steady. Margaret appeared beside her with the community center's AED. I grabbed this. Good. Get it ready. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Sarah worked. She'd done this countless times, but it never got less intense. Each compression was a battle against death, each breath she gave was a plea for life. The AED analyzed the rhythm. Shock advised. Stand clear. Sarah made sure no one was touching the man, then pressed the button. His body jerked. She immediately resumed compressions. Come on, she whispered. Come on, stay with me. After another cycle, the man gasped. His eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened. You're okay, Sarah said soothingly, even as she monitored his pulse. You collapsed, but you're going to be okay. The ambulance is coming. I'm a nurse, and I'm going to stay right here with you. The man tried to speak, but she quieted him gently. Don't try to talk. Save your strength. Just breathe slowly. That's it. The paramedics arrived within minutes and took over. As they loaded the man onto the stretcher, he reached out and grabbed Sarah's hand. Thank you, he managed to whisper. Thank you. After the ambulance left, Sarah stood up, her knees shaking slightly from adrenaline. She turned to find the entire health fair, volunteers and visitors alike, staring at her. Then someone started clapping. It was the gruff elderly man whose blood pressure she'd checked earlier. The applause spread through the crowd until the entire gymnasium was filled with the sound. Margaret appeared at her side, tears streaming down her face. That, she said loudly enough for those nearby to hear, is what I've been trying to tell you all. This woman is a hero. She doesn't see color when someone needs help. She doesn't see rich or poor, friend or stranger. She just sees a human being who needs her, and she acts. The rest of the day was transformed. Sarah's table became the busiest station at the fair. People waited in line not just for blood pressure checks, but to talk to her, to thank her, to learn from her. A teenage girl approached late in the afternoon. I want to be a nurse, she said shyly. Like you. Is it hard? Sarah smiled at her. It can be. But it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Are you in high school? Junior year. Then you've got time to prepare. Strong science grades, volunteer work, and most importantly, Sarah leaned in conspiratorially, you need to really care about people. All people. The girl nodded seriously. I do. I really do. As the health fair wound down, Sarah helped pack up the equipment. She was exhausted but felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. Margaret approached with a man Sarah recognized. He'd been one of the people who had pointedly avoided her table that morning. Sarah, this is Tom Brennan. He's on the city council. Tom extended his hand, looking somewhat embarrassed. Ms. Jenkins, I owe you an apology. I was skeptical this morning about your presence here. But after what I witnessed today, both your medical expertise and your character, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Sarah shook his hand firmly. I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Brennan. Tom, please. He glanced at Margaret, then back to Sarah. Margaret's been pushing for more diversity in our community health initiatives. I've been resistant. But you've opened my eyes today. I'd like to discuss ways the city might partner with healthcare professionals like you to reach underserved areas. Would you be willing to consult with us? Sarah felt a surge of emotion but kept her voice steady. I'd be honored. After Tom left, Margaret hugged Sarah tightly. You see? You see what happens when people actually get to know each other? When they see beyond their prejudices. One person at a time, Sarah said softly. That's how we change the world, Margaret agreed. One heart at a time. Sarah arrived home late, exhausted but fulfilled. David met her at the door with a kiss and a concerned look. Long day? You have no idea. She kicked off her shoes and sank onto the couch. But a good one. A really good one. Her daughter Maya, 10 years old, bounded into the room. Mommy. How was the health fair? It was wonderful, baby. Did you save any lives? Her son Jordan, 8, asked from where he was building with blocks on the floor. Sarah thought about the man whose heart had stopped, about the elderly man who learned about medication assistance, about the teenage girl who now had a role model, about a roomful of people who might see the world a little differently now. Yeah, she said, pulling both children into a hug. I think maybe I did. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Sarah checked her email. There was a message from the hospital administrator. Dear Sarah, I wanted to follow up on the complaint filed last week. After meeting with the patient and family members, and reviewing your impeccable record, we have decided that the complaint was unfounded and based on personal bias rather than any professional misconduct on your part. Furthermore, the patient has since requested that you continue as their nurse. According to the floor supervisor, the patient's daughter had a conversation with her father about his prejudices after witnessing your compassionate care of another patient on the floor. Thank you for your continued excellence and professionalism in the face of undeserved adversity. Sarah read the email twice, then looked at the photo of Mrs. Henderson on her phone, the one from Marcus's graduation. Change was possible. It was hard, it was slow, it required patience and grace and an almost superhuman ability to meet hate with compassion. But it was possible. She thought about Margaret, who at 82 had found the courage to unlearn a lifetime of hatred. She thought about Tom Brennan, who had admitted he was wrong. She thought about the patient who had asked her to come back, and she thought about that teenage girl who wanted to be a nurse. Sarah smiled as she turned off the light. Tomorrow, she would go back to the hospital. She would face whatever came, the gratitude and the prejudice, the victories and the challenges. Because that's what she did. That's what she'd always done. She saved lives. All lives, and in doing so, she reminded the world what it meant to be truly human.